Welcome to the last part of Shifting Paradigm series. We started this journey to make sense of this overwhelmingly fast spinning world by defining, understanding, and tracing paradigms and their shifts. And in the first two parts, we have built a story which unfolds the current paradigms. Before we dive into the future, let's pause and remind ourselves why we started this journey. We began by recognizing that paradigms, those shared sets of assumptions and frameworks, shape our collective mental models. And these mental models, in turn, build the systems we live in, our economies, our political institutions, our cultures, our identities, and even the energy systems that power our lives. And it is these systems that create patterns of behavior across societies, and it is these systems that cause the events we have today. Without understanding them, it is impossible to reverse the humankind's undoing. The idea is simple yet profound. If the way we think changes, the way we live changes. That's where shift starts, and that's why, after exploring how our modern paradigms were built, we now face a crucial question: what comes next? To answer that question, we first need to create a model of understanding that describes how the way we think changes. And to do that, I will utilize a couple of different methodologies from diverse disciplines like systems thinking, cognitive sociology, psychology, and graph theory of mathematics. So please bear with me, and this will be a long one. Here is our agenda for today. We will first develop an understanding of mental models. Then we will talk about behaviors by understanding goal framing theory and how it feeds on mental models. Next up, we will establish an understanding about social phenomena built on these mental models and goal framing theory. And then we will design a network model that reflects our understanding of this world. And finally, we will solve this network through finding clusters, top centrality nodes, and other interactions. It will lead us to cast a near future scenario based on these dynamics. I have put timestamps below so you can go directly to the chapter you want to watch if you don't want to consume this almost 1 hour long video essay. In the 1940s, experimental psychologist Kenneth Craig proposed that the mind constructs small-scale models of reality that it uses to anticipate events and reasons, which was a groundbreaking idea at that time. And then, in the 80s, cognitive science Philip Johnson advanced this concept by framing it as the dependence of reasoning and understanding on constructing internal representations of reality, which he called mental models. And finally, in the 90s, system scientist Peter Senge, who wrote the Systems Thinking Bible, the fifth discipline, suggested that mental models shape our behaviors, and those behaviors yield some results, which in return reorganize our mental models, affecting each hierarchical level of the organization. So he brought a systemic perspective to the discussion. And to support his idea, Peter Senge used Chris Argyris and Donald Schoen's ladder of inference, which simply gives more details on this process, starting from data, selected data, assumptions, conclusions, beliefs, and actions. And actions actually create new data, and this cycle continuously updates itself, which later perfectly fit over Edward Hall's and Donald Meadows' iceberg model, where they suggested a hierarchy between events, patterns, systems, and mental models from top to bottom, and visualized paradigms as the oceans where these icebergs float. We have talked about it earlier in this channel. You can find the relevant sessions below in the description. Now we have a notion of what an mental model is, and let's move on to the behavior part of this model. In the early 2000s, behavior scientists tried and tested many assumptions to model our cognitive processes so that we can have a better understanding of mental models. And one of them I want to talk about here is goal framing theory of Lindenberg and Stagg. Goal framing theory says that human behavior is guided by three overarching goal frames, and only one frame is dominant at a given moment, shaping how we interpret a situation and what we pay attention to. So what is an overarching goal frame? It is like the main lens your brain is using at given moment to decide what matters most. Among all the options, you frame one option and take the shot. It answers the question, what is my main goal right now? And depending on your answer, it guides you to what you pay attention to, how you interpret a situation, and what action you decide to take. So it calibrates your perspective to that particular situation you are facing. And if you may remember from our systems thinking series, that perspective actually defines what is a problem and what is not. And according to Lindenberg and Stack, at any given time, three goal frames compete inside your brain. They are hedonic goal frame, instrumental goal frame, and normative goal frame. I like to think them like Greek gods and goddesses, how Dionysus would see, decide, and act, how Hermes would see, decide, and act, and how Athena would see, decide, and act. If you're familiar with Greek mythology, you might guess them. Hedonic goal frame focuses on feeling good now. It is concerned with finding pleasure and comfort and avoiding pain and effort. For example, when you choose the car instead of walking to your 500 meters away store, your hedonic goal frame won the competition inside your brain. On the other hand, instrumental goal frame focuses on guarding and improving one's resources. It is concerned with financial rewards, gaining or guarding status, performance gains, and efficiency. It can be as simple as choosing to cook at home to save money after a long and exhausting day, or it can be a complex situation like weakening a labor union through causing conflict among them, so your company, which you own, can keep more profits for itself, thus for yourself. And normative goal frame focuses on acting properly because it is obsessed with doing the right thing and being accepted socially. When this frame wins the competition in our brain, we prioritize rules and values of our society over the other goal frames, even at the cost of self-interest. Even though all these three goals are always present for all of us, only one dominates at a time based on the situation, and that dominant frame shapes perception of the situation, directs your attention, and influences your decision making. And they can be manipulated through contextual cues or how a message is framed. So one can trigger a shift from one goal frame to another through means of communication. Take wealth inequality, for example, one of the humanity's largest and most persistent challenges. The gap between the richest and the poorest has grown so vast that it's nearly impossible for the average person to grasp and let alone confront it. This overwhelming scale activates a response of acceptance, which is a mental model called system justification. Governments, corporations, and media skillfully exploit our goal frames to reinforce this acceptance. Media often trigger our hedonic goal frame, distracting us with entertainment and consumerist messages that prioritize immediate pleasures over systemic change. Governments manipulate our normative frame by promoting narratives like economic growth benefits everyone, urging compliance and collective stability rather than critical questioning. And corporations tap into our instrumental frame, convincing us to focus narrowly on individual success, productivity, and efficiency, so framing wealth disparity as a natural outcome of personal achievement rather than systemic design. And through these subtle yet persistent shifts, we stop seeing extreme inequality as a problem. It fades from our radar, becoming simply the way things are, which neutralizes our drive for meaningful intervention. And once a majority of population is neutralized, then organizations and even society itself completely stop seeing this as a problem to be addressed. And this shows the beauty of GFT, goal framing theory, that it can be applied to individual level, organizational level, and even to societal level because you can aggregate those goal frames. And another beauty of this model is that its natural connection to mental models, as set in the wealth equality example. If society holds a mental model of system justification, which leads to acceptance for that situation, then your goal frame shifts towards which one provides the acceptance on that moment. If we zoom out from individual level and look at to the society as a whole, something more powerful begins to emerge, what we call a social phenomenon. It is not just a collection of behaviors, it's a pattern that arises when those behaviors become widespread, self reinforcing, and culturally embedded. It is the difference between one person choosing to overwork and a society where burnout is normalized. When enough people repeatedly act from similar goal frames, shaped by similar mental models, and influenced by the same systemic cues, those actions start to form visible patterns, what we call a social phenomenon. These aren't accidental, they are structured, maintained, and reproduced across generations, institutions, and communication. So, whether it's capital concentration, anti elite rhetoric, externalization of costs, or financial markets, these are not isolated events or individual failings. They are emergent structures of deeper cognitive and systemic loops, echoing our dominant paradigms reflected through the behaviors we collectively enact. Let's take a concrete example. The financial markets, while they are often portrayed as cold, data driven, and feel like they cannot be related to something born out of soft topic like behaviors, they are indeed deeply social phenomena. Every price movement is shaped by millions of individual decisions driven by mental models about risk and value, goal frames like profit maximization, and emotional cues like fear or euphoria. And these individual behaviors repeated and amplified through institutional structures and media narratives, which create patterns like booms, busts, and bubbles. As a matter of fact, financial markets do not reflect any sort of rational reality. Yeah, they don't. Sorry, mainstream economists. It mirrors the dominant beliefs and expectations and incentives of a society. They are absolutely the product of our beliefs shaped by the narratives, and in this way, financial markets are not separate from our culture. They are not some glorious order of merit and hardcore science just because you are crunching some numbers. They are culture, simply translated into numbers. They emerge from us, respond to us, and shape us in return. And just like any other phenomenon, if we want to shift their trajectory, we must first understand the mental models they arise from. And this brings us to the types of phenomena. Just like Lindenberg suggested in goal framing theory, we can think any social phenomenon in the same structure because those phenomena are emerged from behaviors, so they should inherit their DNA, right? So we have obviously three types of phenomena. Phenomena emerging from instrumental purpose-seeking behaviors, phenomena emerging from normative purpose-seeking behaviors, and phenomena emerging from hedonic purpose-seeking behaviors. For example, when we talk about phenomenon of financial markets, we can sense that it feeds on instrumental purpose-seeking behaviors, those driven by the pursuit of efficiency, control, and personal gain. Think of the behaviors it rewards and amplifies. Day trading to chase short-term profits, even if it adds no value to the economy. Offshoring labor or automating jobs to maximize shareholder returns. Buying or dumping stocks based on quarterly earnings, which has nothing to do with long term sustainability. Creating complex financial products like derivatives or credit default swaps, tools designed to optimize risk taking, risk exposure, and return, often with little connection to the real economy. And pump and dump schemes where influencers or institutions manipulate perception for quick gains, and even greenwashing, where companies perform symbolic eco actions just to attract investors while maintaining exploitative practices underneath. These aren't just isolated tactics, they are normalized behaviors within the system, guided by the dominant goal frame, which is instrumental goal frame. Maximize gains, minimize losses, optimize outcomes. And when millions act from that frame over time, we get a market culture obsessed with speed, scale, and surface optics. That is what creates the phenomenon of the financial markets. Not the numbers, but the collective behavior behind the numbers. Alright, I believe we are ready to start building our meta understanding model. Let's briefly remember Peter Sange's organizational mental model system. where he said that behaviors emerge from mental models and those behaviors create results, which in return feedbacks the mental model. Let's expand this with the Donella Meadows and Edward Hall's suggestion, adding those mental models emerging from the paradigms. And next, since we are building a meta model, phenomena would be a better fit actually for the collection of intertwined self reinforcing behaviors, as we have talked earlier. So let's replace behaviors with phenomena emerging from purpose seeking behaviors. And next up, let's talk about results. Traditional results are thought of as immediate measurable consequences of actions, but that's too narrow for what we are building here. Because in the real world, especially in complex social systems, what actually drives feedback isn't just what happens, but what is perceived to be happened. People don't act on objective truth. They act on what they believe the outcomes are, filtered through their own mental models and frames. So, to reflect this cognitive layer, I suggest we shift from using the term results to perceived outcomes, which this allows us to account for misinformation, all of which play a critical role in reinforcing or challenging paradigms. So our loop becomes paradigms shape mental models, and mental models shape phenomena through purpose-seeking behaviors, and phenomena lead to perceived outcomes, and those perceived outcomes reinforce or reshape the mental models. But we are not done yet. There should be a more vital link we need to add, a feedback from perceived outcomes back to phenomena, because paradigms shift in longer periods after accumulation of perceived outcomes. So, once people interpret the outcomes of what's happening, whether through media narratives, institutional framing, or personal experience, they don't just update their mental models immediately. They first adjust their behavior depending on the outcomes. And some other purpose seeking or goal framing behavior can become in charge, feeding another phenomena. If people perceive that short-term investing brings reward, they do more of it, amplifying speculative market behavior. And that leads to a misinformation phenomena. Or if they believe social movements bring no real change, participation drops, weakening the movement itself. But does the response stop? No. It channels into another phenomena like creating conspiracies or anti-elite rhetoric. So phenomena don't just cause outcomes, they also feed on how those outcomes are perceived. This perception loop is what allows phenomena to gain momentum, become normalized, and even institutionalized. Without this feedback, we will be stuck with a linear model that misses the dynamic evolution of the social patterns over time. And finally, no model of change is complete without accounting for shocks and breakthroughs. They are those unexpected events or slow building pressures that reach a tipping point. And these shocks don't come from outside the system. They are produced by the system itself. They are produced by the paradigm itself. When contradictions accumulate, when perceived outcomes no longer align with the lived experiences, and when dominant phenomena push systems to their breaking point, a rupture occurs. These paradigm-generated shocks like financial crashes, ecological collapse, revolutionary technologies, or widespread disillusionment, this creates the disruption needed for a new paradigm to emerge. In our model, these shocks act like pressure valves, releasing tension from the old paradigm while feeding energy, urgency, and legitimacy into the formation of this new one. But here is where things get even more interesting. When an emerging paradigm is born, usually in the aftermath of a breakthrough or shock, it doesn't cook fully with its own mental models, norms, or systems. So what will happen? In its early stages, it often borrows the mental models, languages, and structures created by the previous dominant paradigms, not because it agrees with them, but because that's the only available cognitive and cultural scaffolding. And as a result, the early behaviors and phenomena associated with the emerging paradigms often look a lot like those of the old one. Think of early digital platforms mimicking industrial hierarchies or green economies still tied to growth logic. But as the emerging paradigm gains strength, it starts to challenge and rewire those mental models. And crucially, it also begins to influence phenomena and get influence from the phenomena, seeding new behaviors, narratives, and cultural patterns that begin to deviate from the old system. This is why our model includes a feedback from emerging paradigms back into phenomena, because even while weak and forming, new paradigms don't wait in silence. They experiment, they signal, they iterate, and slowly reshaping what's considered possible, valuable, and real. And eventually, they earn their place in the dominant paradigms, waiting their turn to be challenged in some future. All right. Looks like we have completed our meta model. Is it correct? Honestly, I don't know. But I believe it captures at least some part of the truth, at least seen through my lens. Remember, a socio-technical model is never the reality. It is just a way to make sense of it. And this one, I hope, gives us a better compass for navigating what comes next. Now we have our proposed understanding meta model, so we can project our world onto this, at least the world I'm aware of and have a sliver of knowledge about it. What you will see is a representation of my mind rather than the true all capture of everything in this world. Nevertheless, it is an attempt to unfold this complex, almost chaotic world. If you think there should be other notes in this model, meet me in the comment sections, write down your perspective, and let's start a constructive conversation to make this model a better one. Okay, let's pick up where we left in the part 2 of this series, the set of current paradigms in 5 core oceans. I'll put them around a circle and replicate our meta model by knitting every element to form a network graph. In the economy paradigm, we are stuck in growth addiction, and to satisfy our hunger, we have harnessing the power of networks of human intelligence to innovate and growth as the central paradigm, which is supported by be the first for the best returns, productivity plus efficiency equals growth, and machine 1.0 in business C and fiat money in finance C. And in the identity paradigm, we identify ourselves by what we did, but some of us does this by fitting into society and others by rejecting societal norms, which reflects in the culture paradigm as a clash of modernism and postmodernism, because economy ocean is still heavily influenced by modernism. This clash is also reflected in the energy paradigm. Most governments still think in the framework of centralized energy production and distribution, while there is a huge demand for decentralized energy grids. And politics paradigm is caught between globalization and identity politics, although modern democracies are holding the core mode of thinking, at least for now. Now, these paradigms forge countless mental models of ours. So here I pick a bouquet of them which I believe relevant to iterate this model. For example, the paradigm harnessing the networks of human intelligence to innovate and growth of this knowledge economy supported 3 central mental models of our modern societies: rational actor theory, homo economicus, and technological determinism. Or take the be the first to innovate for best returns. It definitely helped shaping 3 mental models: growth is progress, scarcity, and survival of the fittest. Or let's take the ever shaping paradigm, the productivity plus efficiency equals growth. It almost diffused into every core mental model of ours. Or take globalization. It also has huge impact on how we think. And this bouquet of mental models forge our behaviors, and those behaviors collectively created some phenomena we live by, as we have talked earlier. The first group of phenomena are due to instrumental purpose-seeking behaviors. This group of behaviors is concerned with improving or maintaining one's resources in the long run, as you can remember we talked earlier. Think of the system justification mental model, which frames people to rationalize systemic injustices to feel safe, stable, or simply justify their actions without guilt. This mental model is related to many phenomena, from capital concentration to externalization. Actually, all these phenomena feed on many mental models, not from one to one. For example, the phenomenon of capital concentration is not just related to the system justification mental model itself. There are also homo economicus, scarcity mindset, trickle-down economics, rational actor theory, and optimization for growth all face the capital concentration phenomena. And all these phenomena due to instrumental behavior-seeking behaviors which feed on mental models lead to three globally dominant problems that we continuously fail to solve or address: slow growth, wealth distribution, and environmental crisis. If you remember, we have talked about these dominant problems in the part 2 of Birth of AI Economy. Let's talk about each based on our model's perspective. If we zoom in on the wealth distribution problem, what we find isn't just one bad policy or one greedy rich person. It's a whole network of behaviors and systems that quietly shape the playing field. And most of the phenomena behind this problem, things like capital concentration, tax policies that favor the rich, weakening of labor institutions, or financial markets chasing short-term gains, are powered by instrumental purpose-seeking behaviors. In other words, they are focused on maximizing resources, profit, or control, often without asking who's left behind. Take automation or global labor shifts, for example. They are sold as progress, and they are indeed progress, but at what cost? They often mean lower wages and less security for workers. Or think about how externalization let companies dump their cost onto people, communities, and our shared planet while keeping the profits for themselves. None of these things happen in isolation. They feed off one another, reinforcing a system where self-interest rules and fairness gets pushed up with a world where the wealth gap keeps growing. Not because we don't have enough wealth, but because the system keeps funneling it in the same direction. Now, let's take a look at the environmental crisis. This isn't just about carbon emissions or plastics in the oceans. It's again the results of a system built around extracting as much as possible, as fast as possible, in the name of growth and efficiency. Many of the phenomena linked to environmental breakdown, unsustainable resource extraction, fossil fuel dependence, the take, make, waste logic, and externalization. They are all powered by instrumental purpose-seeking behaviors. These behaviors are focused on maximizing returns, minimizing costs, and keeping the machine running regardless of their long-term damage. For example, if dumping waste is cheaper than safe disposal, the system quietly encourages it. If drilling for oil boosts quarterly earnings, then green alternatives are sidelined. And the take, make, waste model, it's baked into everything from fashion to tech. It's not that people or companies are evil, it's that the dominant goal frame rewards short-term gain over long-term responsibility. So the environmental crisis isn't just a failure of regulation or science, it's a reflection of the mental models and behaviors we have allowed to shape our systems. And finally, we arrive at the issue of slow growth, which, let's be honest, wouldn't even feel like a crisis if we weren't so hooked on the idea that more is always better. Our obsession with growth dates back to centuries, from the days of mercantile empires to modern GDP-fueled economies, as we have talked in the second part of Shifting Paradigms. And today, it is this addiction to grow that turns a natural plateau into a full-blown panic. Many of the phenomena that lead to slow growth, like diminishing returns of productivity gains, regulatory rigidity, high debt levels, and even the maturation of once powerful growth engines, are all symptoms of a system that was built to sprint forever. But nothing grows forever. Ecosystems grow, then stabilize. Bodies grow, then mature. But our economic system, it's been stuck in more is better mode for centuries. So when the system begins to slow down, as it inevitably does, we don't pause and reflect. We treat it like failure. That's why slow growth feels like a dominant problem. Not because growth is bad, but because our instrumental behaviors have made it the only goal we recognize. But there are other phenomena that act as a counterbalance to hold back this first group. They are phenomena due to normative purpose-seeking behaviors. This group of behaviors prioritizes acting appropriately in the service of a society where they feel they belong to. Let's briefly talk about the relationship to the dominant problems. To overcome the wealth distribution issue, normative behaviors lead to progressive taxation practices or design inclusive economic policies. And for the environmental crisis, they tackle it by carbon pricing, Green New Deal, or climate agreements. And finally, to accelerate growth again, we see practices like monetary and fiscal stimulus and regulatory reforms or tech and infrastructure investments, etc. So now we have a group of phenomena intensifying dominant global problems because of their self-interested nature, and a counter group that tries to balance or tackle those intensified problems, at least in the long run. Yet another group of phenomena is growing because of these three dominant problems, and they are due to hedonic purpose-seeking behaviors. These hedonic driven phenomena emerge not from long term reasoning or collective values, but from desire to cope, to feel better right now, just right now. And in the world full of uncertainty, slow progress, and overwhelming problems, these short term comfort strategies can spread fast. Think of conspiracies that offer simple answers, anti-elite rhetoric that channels frustration into blame, or protectionist policies that promise safety by closing borders. These phenomena may feel good in the moment, like emotional relief valves, but they rarely address root causes. Instead, they divert energy from systemic change, fracture trust in institutions, and make it harder for normative or instrumental responses to take hold. And that's why, in our model, hedonic behaviors don't just sit off to the side, they actively shape the system. They create noise, they delay reform, and often reinforce the very conditions that cause the distress in the first place. Before continuing, let's recap what we have modeled so far. We began with the current set of paradigms, then traced their relations to our modern mental models. Then, from those mental models, we looked at phenomena due to instrumental purpose-seeking behaviors and their relations to the global dominant problems, and other two groups of phenomena which are reactions to dominant problems mainly driven by instrumental group. And this brings us to our next topic, external shocks and breakthroughs, the critical events we have faced in the last decade. They are constructed over the current paradigms, like the case of China dilemma, where states both want to keep the perks of economic gains from China and not wanting China to become a superpower. But this dilemma is the very product of the four modern paradigms that built this empire. Or let's look at the rise of AI. Artificial intelligence wasn't born in a vacuum. It emerged because the six paradigms we explored earlier created the technological, economic, and cultural conditions that allowed it to flourish. These breakthroughs inevitably lead to emerging paradigms, as we modeled earlier. These emerging paradigms are part of reaction by nature, and they are closely related to breakthroughs, but they are not from outer space. They also feed on the mental models. Let's take the rising Machine 2.0 paradigm. Mental models such as growth is progress, linear causality, or path dependence form its foundation. And these emerging paradigms feed on mental models and shape some of the phenomena as well. For example, degrowth and circular economy paradigm impacts some phenomena like carbon pricing, Green New Deal, climate agreements, etc. So now let's step back and look at the full picture. What we have is a snapshot of the world, a living mesh of ideas, behaviors, and systems as seen through the lens of this model. It may look chaotic, but it's not without structure actually. Beneath this chaos, there is a kind of order. And the real question becomes, can we extract insights from this mesh? Can we read this map to understand where the system is being held together and where it might break? The answer might be yes, since this is ultimately a network, even if it's contextual. We can begin to analyze it by exploring the centrality of nodes, helping us identify which elements have the most influence, which are holding things together, and which ones might be tipping points. If you want to explore it for yourself, I will leave the link down below in the description. To make sense of this network, we can borrow a few simple tools from the graph theory. Don't worry, no formulas, just ways of spotting who's playing what role in this system. Think of each node, whether it's a paradigm, mental model, or phenomenon, as a person in a big party, and the links between them as conversations and relationships. Some nodes are like social butterflies. They talk to everyone, they are attractive and influential. That's degree centrality, how many direct connections a node has. Others are the wingmates. They introduce ideas from one corner of the club to another, and they know who knows a guy who knows a guy. That's the between centrality. They are the connectors between distant parts of the system. Then there are dispatchers. They are not the coolest, but they are perfectly positioned to reach anyone quickly. They know who is where. That's the closeness centrality. It's about speed and access. And finally, we have the deep influences. they might not seem essential at the first glance, but they are connected to all the heavy party dudes and girls, the most attractive social butterflies, the most active wingmates, and the best dispatchers. They are the eigenvector centrality. They matter not just because they are connected, but because who they are connected to matters. With these four types in mind, we can start to spot who holds the system together, the ones spreading the influence, the hidden nodes that quietly shape everything else. So let's go back to our meta model and put top centrality node types to their corresponding places in the model. They are the top dogs of this party. Now we need to understand the dynamics of interaction by unfolding their goals. Since this is network after all, we can try to find what sort of communities we have in this system, which are tightly interconnected and supporting each other and influencing these top centrality nodes. Any group of paradigms, mental models, phenomena, and maybe a couple of emerging paradigms might create a meaningful community that are tightly connected and self-organized to pursue some goal of theirs. And after testing some algorithms, here are the tight communities that I have found in our network. The first community is opportunist individualists. This community is centered around current identity paradigm, both fit into society and be yourself, and heavily use two mental models, which are atomized individualism and externalization of cost, and they leverage addiction to growth phenomena to get the most out of the system. When these groups need a normative action, they tend to influence regulatory reforms and monetary fiscal stimulus to serve their advantage because they validate themselves through performance. They translate identity narratives into measurable outputs. The second community what I found is growth worshippers. This community is anchored around productivity plus efficiency equals growth and be the first to innovate for best returns paradigms. Their mental models are obviously growth is progress, optimization for efficiency, and command control thinking. And they drive high depth levels. And together with opportunist individuals, they leverage financial markets to realize themselves. And to keep the growth, they tend to support inclusive economic policies like universal basic income so that the market never dies. And they drive ever faster innovation and return cycles for boom. And when the bust hits, they backfill with stimulus for inclusiveness. And the third community is sane futurists. This community is newly formed. They were partying inside other communities, but when the COVID hit and AI became a thing, they left their communities and formed a new community at the center of this dance floor. They anchored around two emerging paradigms. They are harnessing co-intelligence to innovate and degrowth with circular economy. They push Green New Deal, Code of Sustainability, and circular economy to be the dominant phenomena of this floor because they are reframers and pursue the goal of generating and institutionalizing alternative operating models. Our fourth community is lotus eating self-achievers. They are the freaks of the floor. They are anchored around identify by what you did, and they leverage in instrumental phenomena like protectionism, conspiracies, externalization, unsustainable resource extraction, and addiction to grow, who is also the DJ now raving this party. They are small and tight group, but currently dominating the floor. Their only goal is to stay dominant whatever it requires. And our final community is extremist capitalists. They are the rich kids supporting lotus eating self-achievers and have close relationships with opportunist individuals and growth worshippers. They are not anchored around any current or emerging paradigms but ruled by trickle-down mental model, leveraging tax policies and capital concentration. Their goal is to keep mainstream as is, if not assign and support who will be next mainstream, without any hesitation to deploy extreme measures. And remember, they are already pushing lotus eating self-achievers. So now let's go back to our meta model and put the self-organized cluster at center. Two groups are working for deciding who will be the next mainstream DJ and influencing top centrality nodes. They are sane futurists and extremist capitalists. So what's next? Alright, now let's take a break and go back to history and understand something crucial. At every turning point of economy, it was always followed by some monetary shift. If we rewind history, there is a rhythm in the chaos. At every major turning point in the economic paradigm, There was always a preceding or simultaneous shift in the monetary logic that underpinned it. The mercantile era rode on the back of ladders of credit and gold standard logic of colonial exchange. The industrial era followed with central banks and regulated money. The launch economy emerged alongside fiat currencies to fuel scaling and infrastructure expansion and build an empire of digital financialization where money itself became increasingly abstract and algorithmic. Each monetary system didn't just support the economy, it enabled the paradigm to scale and mainstream. And just as these paradigms collided, collapsed, and gave birth to new and next paradigms, we find ourselves now in a similar moment in history. Today's monetary contradictions like speculative markets, unsustainable debt cycles, inflation volatility, and the rise of crypto and digital currencies. These are all the tremors beneath the surface. They signal that the current operating system, with addiction to growth as its DJ, is hitting its final notes. So I'm sure that we will have a major change in the monetary model in the next 10 years. We don't know who will be the next DJ after addiction to grow, but we can have a pretty good idea of which monetary model we will have in the following years because we are living in a deeply connected world and heavily institutionalized financial model. It is not easy to change everything in one night. We are not in 1971 when Nixon shocked the world by decoupling US dollar and gold. A similar sharp move will certainly destroy the financial infrastructure and thus economy. However, it is not impossible in this craziness, as you know. Anyways, let's assume that we are not that crazy and we won't detonate our institutions overnight. What kinds of monetary shifts might emerge next? We already know that decentralized forms of money and digitalized currencies gaining traction as an emerging paradigm, and fiat money of current world holds tight its position. Let's elaborate the most potential candidate for the next monetary era, which is central bank digital currencies. CBDC is a digital version of fiat money issued and controlled by central banks. In current model, central banks issue money proportionate to their debt bonds to commercial banks, and those commercial banks distribute it to the economy. But CBDCs open a new method. In this model, central banks can issue digital money directly into your pocket, your bank accounts, based on inflationary or other corrective algorithms. Their magic is their programmability and their traceability. This will also still be built on interest-bearing debt and centralized control, but give the ability to intervene in micro-scale or managing inflation and economic stimulus. At first, standard fiat currencies and digital ones circulate side by side, but eventually all will be digitalized and allow global normative phenomena like universal basic income schemes or other inclusive economic measures to roll out easily. Of course, it comes with the problem of financial privacy, but that's another day's topic to discuss actually. Growth worshippers and opportunist individualists are hyping this model through whispering to their wingmate globalization to distribute this hype with its dispatchers, techno-optimism, and monetary fiscal policies. And apparently, no cluster is opposing this idea. Let's imagine a future shaped not by steady consensus but by disruption, overreaction, and ultimately recalibration. Everything starts, it doubles down on protectionist tariffs, pushing policies to their extreme. And these moves spark immediate retaliations from trading blocs across the globe. And this is where we are now actually. So what's next? The global market seizes, supply chains rupture, and growth flatlines. And in response, populist right movements surge across Europe and Asia, fueled by conspiracies and economic anxiety. And this comes with the anti-elite rhetoric becoming the norm, a setback for our extremist capitalists. And protectionist policies spread like wildfire. And national governments isolate, reindustrialize, and rally their own lotus-eating self-achievers to this cause. And bouncers like rules-based order try to keep this chaos contained, but it can't handle the volume. At first, the social butterflies like growth is progress and short-termism love the attention. They echo the populist noise. Wingmains like globalization lose its relevance obviously, and deep influences like technological determinism withdraw into niche tech bubbles, and everything spins. But quickly, the party begins to rot. Living standards plummet everywhere, trust in institutions evaporates, and people grow tired of empty nationalism and cultural flashbacks. And disillusion plague spreads all over the world. And this is when the sane futurist steps in, harnessing new breakthroughs like, say, artificial general intelligence and modular energy grids. They begin reframing the floor with support from deep influences like degrowth and co-intelligence, and dispatches like monetary fiscal stimulus and inclusive policies. And they start to cohere a new operating logic that appreciates everyone's value on the floor, because everyone will feel fucked up at the moment. And they bring the already cooked idea of central bank digital currencies to the table, because now AGI is capable enough to operate this model, and we need many smart micro interventions everywhere to run a model tailored to everyone's need. And in this collapse, central banks looking for an order will lean into the idea of CBDCs that offer both control and modernization, and promote it as a stabilizer against this chaotic speculation and national fragmentation. CBDCs find support across factions. They promise direct stimulus, micro-targeted interventions, and smooth global operation. Wingmains like modernism and techno-optimism pass this message efficiently to the masses, and growth worshippers know the value in the control it offers, and opportunist individuals embrace its potential for direct performance validation. And just like that, the DJ booth changes. Addiction to grow fades to the background. CBDC drop the next beat. Clean, precise, and programmable. The room doesn't explode, it exhales. Chaotic playlists fade away and a new tempo begins. I hope you enjoyed this final chapter of Shifting Paradigm series. If it sparked something in you, an insight, a question, or even a how to disagreement, drop your thoughts in the comment section below. I would love to hear how you see the map we just explored. If you found value in this content, please like, subscribe, and most importantly, share it with someone who has been trying to make sense of this chaos too. Preparing this kind of content takes a lot of time, care, and research, and your support helps me keep creating and growing this channel, so help me spread the word. This is not the end of our journey for paradigms. In the coming weeks, I will be diving deeper into key building blocks of this model, like mental models, monetary alternatives, system behaviors, and future paradigms, along with some everyday behaviors with short explanatory videos. I promise, not like just 1 hour long videos. And I will make each part more understandable and usable in your own thinking. Until then, stay curious and take care.